Wenn dat Laub in Herbste von de Bäumen und Blüsenflauch und de Jägers de ersten Hasen dautscheut, dann dachten wir Kinder all an Söte Biskes und Nürte, an den Sünderklaus und an dat Weihnachtsfest. Und wenn wir in düsse Jahrestied af und zu über de Strenge slögen und wat Leiges utlaupen löten, dann wollen de Grauten uns wohl in Angst jagen, wenn sie uns torröwen. Tövet manche Böskes, wenn die nicht ganz sipp und ordentlich sind, dann soll ju de Sünderklaus wohl in den Grautensack stärken und mitnehmen, und bovenhin soll he ju eine derbe Rohren bringen. Hey everyone, today I will be talking about Christmas traditions in German folklore and folk culture. Many of you might already have some ideas of what that might entail, usually things like Krampus, or even if you're a bit more cultured, Frau Perchta or something like that. However, I feel like there are already enough videos on that on the internet, and there are enough resources about that everywhere, so I wanted to focus in on less known traditions. Most of the examples that I have here today are from my region in the northwest of Germany, but they also have counterparts in other regions. I know that I have a lot of followers, especially from the US, and what you guys consider as like the spooky time of the year usually centers around Halloween, and that is also more and more becoming the case here in Europe. However, our prime spooky season traditionally was the Christmas period, which might sound a bit weird for those of you that grew up on Hallmark movies and I don't know, what other traditionally kitschy Christmas stuff do you guys do in the US? If you would like to enlighten this European on US-American Christmas traditions, comment them down below. Over in Europe, however, Christmas and the Christmas period generally was the time where spirits were more out and about than most times. Now, this might have to do with the general liminality of this time of year, and I already talked about liminality in German folk magic in another video that I have made, but just to reiterate, liminality is the space in between something. So, for example, the crossroads would be a liminal place because this is the place where the roads depart. A door frame is a liminal place because it connects two rooms and is neither really here or there. And the same thing can be true for specific time periods, like often around midnight, the time between 2 days, or also on midday when the morning half of the day transitions into the evening half of the day. And just like that, the Christmas period is a time not just between 2 years, but also between 2 sun circles, as marked by the winter solstice, the longest night and the shortest day of the year, usually taking place around 21st to the 22nd of December. Also, this period was particularly dangerous. It was a very cold time of year, food might be very scarce, people got sick more easily, and depending on where you lived, the weather was very, very harsh. For example, the Mediterranean region is experiencing a lot of storms this time of year, and up here in the north, of course, it's pretty cold. So that might give you an idea of why people viewed this time as especially dangerous and kind of not as fun as you might do today. Now, with this time of year come a bunch of different traditions and belief sets, which are very interesting, I think, such as the already mentioned Krampus, a figure from Bavarian and also, I believe, Austrian folklore, which abducts or beats misbehaving children. And usually this figure is personified by several men of a specific village or city dressed up in big, scary fursuits in which they run through the streets with and, cause mayhem. And similar traditions to this exist all over Germany and also, I believe, southern Scandinavia. Besides that, there are also specific taboos and belief sets that you must follow during this time, like, for example, not hanging up your laundry to dry, which I get into the reason for that a bit later. So I'm going to be talking about both like spiritual specters that might visit you during this time, as well as general belief sets. So here in the Northwest, one of these winter spirits that comes to visit us is Sünderklaus. However, modern-day Germans will mostly know him as Nikolaus, Saint Nick. Sünderklaus is the Low Saxon term for him, and he was also sometimes just referred to as the Klaus. Now in modern times, and this is also what I grew up with, Saint Nick will arrive in the village in company of another figure called Knecht Ruprecht, and they are basically this dynamic Christmas duo that visits children on the night of the 5th of December leading up to the 6th of December. And children leave their shoes in front of the doors or the windowsills, and then on the following morning they would be filled by Saint Nick with sweets and stuff like that, and small presents. Now Knecht Ruprecht, on the other hand, is more the punishing side of this tradition. In ye olden times he would sometimes beat misbehaving children up, but generally he was just there to scare them. Now in the kindergarten that I went to, we had people dress up as Saint Nick and Knecht Ruprecht, and we didn't get a beating, but it was still very intimidating to see them right in front of you with their booming voices, and I was scared of both of them, not gonna lie. Usually Saint Nick would have this like big golden book out of which he read all of the conflicts that took place throughout the year leading up to this day. And then he would ask the children involved if they had grown from that experience, if they were sorry, and he would also often make them promise to never do it again if something had happened. Knecht Ruprecht basically just stood in the background and looked scary. And that was quite enough for us. Also, I believe my grandparents grew up with this duo also. However, before that, Saint Nick incorporated both the more pleasant present gifting side and the more grim punishing side. And it was at that time where he was mostly, at least in my region, referred to as Sinterklaas. Now he was described as an old man with a mighty white beard, and he was believed to arrive on a white horse carrying a carriage full of the presents that he was going to gift to the children, and he was then traveling from house to house, visiting each family and each village and traveling to the end of the world, basically. In some accounts he also has a walking stick made out of birch wood, which he sometimes would use to beat the misbehaving children. At other times he would leave behind a specialized beating rod made out of willow branches for the father as a gift to beat the misbehaving children throughout the coming year. So yeah, this was a celebration which involved a lot of beating if you weren't lucky. But just like in modern times, he left presents in the shoes of the children. Back then there were still these traditionally wooden shoes that are worn in my region and also the Netherlands. We call them holzken, and usually these gifts would entail nuts, apples, tangerines, and even sometimes cookies. Now on his back he carried a sack which he would threaten to put the misbehaving children into and then carry them away with him to who knows where. What I find interesting is that he did not always visit families on the 6th of December. In some traditions he did not arrive until the 1st of January. And this was especially unlucky because if the children had received presents on Christmas Day and misbehaved after that, he could take these presents away again on the 1st of January. So you already see that these characters that visit around the Christmas time have a lot to do with regulating the behavior of children and kind of upkeeping the social order at a time where it was especially important to do so. Because as we have discussed, this period was especially unrestful and chaotic with all the bad weather outside. So I can imagine that these figures coming and reinstating the social order would kind of give the people some sort of stability in an unstable time. Another figure that would usually visit the families on Christmas Eve was the Christkindchen, which is Low Saxon for Christ child. However, if you think that baby Jesus himself is going from house to house delivering presents, I have to disappoint you. The Christkindchen was imagined more as sort of usually a girl with long wavy blonde hair in a white silk dress. So basically the only thing that connects her to Jesus would be the name, and I guess no one really questions that, so what do I know. Now if you were especially lucky, the Christkindchen would switch the harvested oats in the barn of the family with already baked goods called Stutenkerl, which directly translated would be like mare dude. So horse symbology comes up a lot with this. Also the Christkindchen would usually gift similar presents to what Santa Claus might have already brought a few weeks before. However, it would leave those presents under the Christmas tree, which it sometimes would also gift on that day, on Christmas Eve. To show gratitude towards the Christkindchen, the children would sometimes sprinkle a couple of oats in front of the house door. And speaking of horses, it was believed that they could actually talk during this time, usually somewhere around night when not many people were around, because it was like a secret thing that they did between themselves. And sometimes these horses would then discuss future events that were going to happen in the following year. So if you were really sneaky, you could hide yourself in the barn and listen in on their conversation. Now, a really weird and interesting ritual took place in a village near me. After the farmer would return from church on Christmas Day, he was not allowed to speak in his home. He would go to the bread cupboard and take out a stone axe and lay that on the kitchen table. And then he would cut off a slice of the bread that was already laying there and feed that to his best horse. All in silence, might I add. After that, he would take the stone axe and put it back into the cupboard, and only then was he allowed to speak. Otherwise, it was believed that his best horse would perish or get really sick in the following year. Something in a bit of a similar vein is the belief that you weren't allowed to get rid of the manure that the cows produced in the stable during the 12 nights of Christmas. Otherwise, the best cow would also perish in the following year. And this is where we already get into the taboos of this period, because they are a lot. The taboos and creepiness level gradually increases the closer you get to Christmas, and then from Christmas Day to the 6th of January usually is the height of these traditions. These 12 days of Christmas are also referred to as Rauhnächte. And this was the period where all of the gates of the other world basically opened and a bunch of spirits came flying through the sky and caused mayhem. As I said, this was already sometimes personified by the humans, but it had also more of a metaphysical aspect to it. So the taboo that I already mentioned, that you weren't allowed to hang up clothes to dry outside, it was because the people believed that spirits could get entangled in these clothes and then maybe curse the family or be brought in with the clothes into the home and be a malefic presence there. And then they would sew the corpse shroud for one of the family members that then was ultimately going to die the next year out of these clothes. So all around, it was just a bad idea. Another big important thing is that you should have finished or at least put to rest all of your big projects during this time. There was especially a taboo around spinning or weaving. If you still were to spin, you would maybe be punished by the Voidenjäger, which is basically a regional term for a thing called the Wild Hunt, which is this entourage of malefic spirits that ride around during the Rauhnächte. In some accounts, if you were to spin during this time, a giant arm would crash through the window and either take or break all of your knitting wear. Besides that, another big theme of this time of year was divination. Although it was kind of frowned upon, because for that divination you were kind of using the chaotic forces at play, and when most people tried to get rid of these forces or stay protected from them, it was kind of weird when people actively tried to use them to their advantage. But during this time you could use a special form of divination. Usually this was done by Spökenkieker, and this is just a regional name for magic practitioners that center specifically around divination. Now, there is a natural lake in my village, and during either Christmas Day or New Year's Day, people would come there sometimes around midnight to make it even more liminal, and they would stand at that lake and really intently listen if they could hear church bells ringing. Now, if they did, that was a bad sign for the coming year. However, if everything remained silent, there was no big catastrophe coming. Sometimes they would also encircle churchyards or graveyards a couple of times and then receive visions during that walk. There were also a lot of taboos that they would have to upkeep during that time. For example, not talking, either to themselves or to people that they would meet during that process, because, as I said, spirits were afoot during that time and they would come for you. Similar traditions exist also in southern Scandinavia, where they are referred to as the Årsgång. I already made a TikTok on my local tradition of this divination seeking, and I'm going to link that down below so you can check that out. But I'll be talking about this form of divination a bit more when I get to the video on 𝔖𝔭𝔬𝔢𝔨𝔬𝔢𝔨 specifically. So as you can see, the sun is already encroaching my space, so I'm going to take this as a sign that I've already said enough. With that being said, all of my social media is in the description below if you want more content from me. And yeah, until next time, 𝔖𝔨 𝔖𝔨𝔬𝔢𝔨𝔨.